Welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. Sometimes I get stories sent to me that are so incredible that they really leave a mark on you. And tonight, I've got a good one for you. I've got Jared with me, and Jared had a very scary, life-changing Class A encounter with a Dogman creature in the state of Washington. This creature tried to break into his home, and he's very fortunate to be able to share this encounter with you guys. We're going to dive into that, and then after that, I've got another Dogman encounter for you guys out of the state of North Carolina. It's another scary one that's just very hard to explain, but we're going to jump into all that. But before we do, I just want to say thank you for being here, and if you've got an encounter you would like to send me, you can always email me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. But let's jump right in the story. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Man, I'm excited to have you here. I know you've got a really incredible encounter to talk about, and if you can, take us back to when this started about a year ago in Washington and just kind of walk us through that encounter.
Well, I can't remember exactly what day in the week that it was. I was coming home from work, and that night, I work night shift, so I get home about 12:30, 1 o'clock at night. So I get home, get on my truck, and that night it was clear. It wasn't really rainy, windy, or anything like that. It was just quiet. And usually, we'll hear owls or some frogs because we were living pretty close to a lake at this time. Uh, but that night when I got out of my truck to go into the house, it was just dead quiet. There was no frogs or no owls. It was just dead silent, like you can hear a pin drop. So it was just weirdly quiet. So I was like, something's not right. Maybe a bear's in the area, maybe a cougar's in the area. Because we have seen those, and there has been reports of them being in the area. So as I'm walking up to my front porch, the hairs on my neck stand up, and I'm like, I feel like something's watching me, and I've never felt this before. So it freaked me out. So I booked it. I ran straight for that front door, unlocked it, got inside, shut the door, and locked it. And felt better after that. Dogs weren't barking. We had two Yorkies at the time. They were probably about 10 months old each. They were in their kennels by the front door. And they weren't barking or anything. Usually, if we've had something in the area, they'll kind of growl or bark. But they're quiet, so I'm like, okay, nothing to really worry about. So, took my shoes off, took all my work stuff off and went straight to my bedroom. Usually when I get home, I'll watch some Netflix, just to kind of simmer off, cool down, relax before I go to sleep. My roommate, who was my really good friend at the time, we work in the same place, but he works days, I work nights. That way we can, take care of the dogs and they're not by themselves for 8 hours. Well, he's sleeping, and I go in my room and start watching some Netflix. And about 20, 30 minutes go by, and the dogs just go absolute ballistic. So I go out there and I yell at them, like, hey, there's nothing out there, quiet. I knew they didn't have to go to the bathroom because we've kind of trained them to not need to go out at night. They go out when he gets home and he potties them before he goes to bed, and then they should be good until the morning. So I go out there, hang out with them for a bit, got them to cool down, go back into my room, and about 10 minutes after that, they start going crazy again. And within 5 minutes of them starting up to bark again, we hear a loud bang on the house. Now, what we were living in was a 70s trailer that we were renting. So it sat off the ground a good, 5, 6 feet because it's still got its tires. But we hear this loud bang against the house, and it wakes my roommate up because it shook the house. And I was like, I don't know what that was. He's like, you know what? Grab your gun. I'm gonna grab my gun. Let's go investigate outside. I'm like, all right. So I grab my gun. He grabs his, and we go to the front door, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna just open it wide up really fast. You watch my back. I'm like, you got it. I'm locked and loaded. Let's go. So he swings that front door open, and on this trailer, it had a screen door that was partially glass and partially just screen. Well, it's got one of those hydraulic things on it to help close it when you would, open it and let go. So that rod was bent 90 degrees, keeping this door open against the house. It left a dent into the house itself because it wasn't, wood. It's metal siding. There is a dent in it, and that rod is bent 90 degrees, so that door will not shut. And we were looking at that, and we're like, there's no way a person could have done this, and there's no way. And, we go out there, we turn on our flashlights, we, rack both guns, getting them ready, because we figured, okay, there's got to be a big animal in the area, and it's probably still around, so we need to be ready to put it down if it comes after us. So we go down the steps, and it's pitch black. So out there in Seebeck, there are no street lights. When it's dark, it's dark. You can't see more than 5 feet in front of you. So we're walking around the property. We don't see any footsteps at the time. We don't notice anything different. Garbage cans weren't touched, which we thought was odd. Because usually, if maybe we were thinking it was a bear, and usually bears will go right after the trash cans. Because I know our trash cans, they were full at this time. I knew the garbage day was the next day, but garbage cans were not touched. So we thought that was a little odd. So we kept going around the house, and we didn't see anything. So we were like, screw it. Let's go back inside and let's just hang out with the dogs for a bit because we were both pretty shaken. And we hung out for about an hour. He was like, all right, I'm going to go, lay down. Okay, I'm going to go lay down too, but I'm keeping my gun with me. He's like, yeah. Next thing I hear is, I just checked the camera. Something ran in front of the camera. I'm like, well, what ran in front of the camera? He's like, dude, I've never seen anything like this. And we looked at it, and it was something with dog legs running on two legs, and it ran past the camera. And that's going in front of the house alongside the shed. And once it gets alongside the shed that we had, you can't see anything more in that camera. But we had another camera in the shed. That way, if someone tried to break into our shed and try to get our toys, we would be able to catch them on camera. But we were able to pick up something on that camera, just noise, because it would do audio and picture. We were able to get audio of it slamming against the shed and running through and then just disappearing. That freaked us out. And this thing had to have been 7, 8 feet tall from what we could tell from video. Um, and that freaked us out. And we didn't sleep the rest of the night. We stayed wide awake, holding our guns. We're like, okay, if it comes in, we're putting this thing down. When we go outside the next morning, we're looking around to see what damage it may have done to the shed because we didn't want to go back outside after seeing what we saw on the camera. Unfortunately, though, with that camera, it doesn't hold recordings more than 24 hours. So unfortunately, we could not save that recording. I wish we could have because that was just incredible watching on camera. But I still have the recording or the audio of it slamming against the shed. That I was able to keep. But when I went outside and was looking around, I noticed something on the glass of the window that was next to the shed. And at that night, we had all our drapes open. So if anything wanted to look through the window and look into the house, it could. Well, looking at the window from the outside, I'm 6'3", and where this thing I saw in the window, it looked like a nose print. So if you ever had a dog put its nose up against the glass and leave a mark, that's what I saw. But even with me reaching my hand all the way up, I couldn't really reach where that print was. And, even me trying to look through the window, I kind of have to go up on my tippy toes. And this mark was about halfway up on the glass. So it had to have been 7, 8 foot tall. Looking into the glass, and what made me think was, okay, maybe he was looking in the glass last night, saw the dogs, wanted to get the dogs, so it came around to the door and rammed that thing open to try to get into the house. Now, I don't know why it didn't try to go through the wooden door that was next, because it didn't have a deadbolt. It easily could have just knocked that thing down and come right in, but it didn't. So it makes me think that when he slammed that thing open, that the noise scared him. I don't know. But, we continued to look around the property. We didn't see any footprints. It wasn't really muddy, so I wouldn't think any prints would be left. But we hadn't had any incidents for a few days. I was coming home from work early that day, um, and as I was driving down my private road, I noticed something in the bushes on my left-hand side, and it was just, from what I could tell, it was a giant wolf head, and it was looking right at me from the bushes. And I'm in my truck driving towards it, and I'm like, you know what? If that thing comes out, I'm gonna floor it. I'm gonna run this thing over. I don't care. I'm in a truck. What's that thing gonna do to my truck? So I kept going, and it still stayed there. It locked on to me, watching me. And as I am pulling into my driveway, which is on the right hand side, he was on the left hand side of the road. He took off into the woods, just flat out disappeared. I ran into the house. I grabbed my gun. I came back out looking for it, but it was already gone. And since then, I have not seen or heard anything. And this was early November that all this happened. That be, so that coming June, we called it quits and we packed our things up and we left because we didn't want to stay another year in that house because that scared us. So I ended up going to family. He ended up going back to family, and we just left. And we just haven't talked about it. We haven't told anybody. I mean, we did tell some people, but we ended up telling people that it was a bear, and we didn't want to tell people that it was a wolf type Dogman thing because we didn't want to get made fun of and think that we're crazy. So
First off, I just want to say, thanks for being brave enough to come on here and share that, because you're right. It's not an easy thing to talk about, and you never know how people are going to react. And I appreciate you coming on here and sharing that. And I don't blame you for leaving. I would have left too, man. There's no way I would have stayed there. But, one of the first things I like to ask my guests before we get into anything else is, how did that encounter, seeing that creature, knowing that thing was out there, but how did that affect the rest of your life?
I definitely will not go out in the woods without a gun, that or by myself for that matter. Yeah, I won't go out in the woods by myself or without a weapon, period. Um, I haven't really gone out in the woods since then. Um, I've had friends ask me like, "Hey, we're gonna go for a hike. You want to go?" And it's like, no, I don't really want to go. Um, it's definitely scared the crap out of me for sure.
I don't blame you, man. A lot of people after seeing these things, they don't go off into the woods anymore. And there's something different about Dogman. Bigfoot can go either way. It's going to be a good counter sometimes, but with Dogman, it's always based around fear. And in my opinion, you're very fortunate to be here to share that encounter, and for that thing to try to get in your house like that. That's probably the first time I've ever heard of an encounter like that. From the video that you lost, what kind of details can you tell us? Do you remember anything specific about the creature?
It was definitely black, brownish hair. Granted it was nighttime and it was a night vision camera, but it didn't really pick up the best details. I mean, it wasn't a 4K camera. Um, but it was tall and it was running on two legs, which it was just huge. It definitely had long legs. You could see its claws on its hands, because couldn't really see the feet too well just because it ran so fast. Um, but it definitely looked canine that was on two legs. Um, you could see a little bit of, like really broad shoulders. You couldn't really see a whole lot of muscle, but it was pretty big. Um, but I can definitely tell it was brown slash black, especially when I saw it in the daytime. Just its head, it was definitely black and brown. I don't know if it was the same one. I'm gonna have to assume so. I'm assuming he probably never left because he didn't get his dinner that night.
Yeah, you're probably right, man. I would think you're right about that. And who knows with these creatures, man. And I again, man, you are very fortunate to be here to share that, because that could have went really bad, man. And I'm glad that you're here to share that. But Washington State is known for Bigfoot encounters. You don't hear too much about Dogman, but before that encounter, had you ever heard of Dogman before, or did you know much about it?
At the time that we had this encounter, I didn't know Dogmen existed. I knew about Bigfoot. I've heard all the time since I was a kid about Bigfoot. Um, but I did not hear anything about Dogman until I had that encounter, and then I wanted to know more about it. So at that point, I started doing more research about Dogman, watching different podcasts on YouTube, watching different videos of people's other encounters that they've had. I have tried to contact a few other different YouTubers because I did want to come out and tell my story, mostly because there hasn't been a whole lot of sightings in Washington State of Dogman. There has been, I think, one or two sightings up north, probably 2 or 3 hours north of me, but there hasn't been any sightings that I've heard of in my area.
When Daniel reached out to me and told me about your encounter, I knew I had to have you on the show, because you really don't hear about Dogman stuff very much in your area, especially in the state of Washington. It's primarily Bigfoot, and that's kind of what it's known for. But your encounter really, really intrigued me. But, one of the things I wanted to ask you, man, is what do you think kept you safe that night? With this thing trying to break it into your house, man, what do you think stopped it?
Well, I am Christian. That's how I was born and raised. I honestly believe that God kept me safe that night. My thinking is that it just wasn't my time to go. If that thing had its intentions of wanting to take me out that night, I think God stopped it from happening.
I think you hit it right on the head, man. I think God kept you safe that night. I was talking to a guy who had a Dogman encounter, very unusual, as a lot of these things are, but he shot one of these creatures when he was a kid, right? He didn't know what it was. And he said he heard this thing talk to him to tell him that it was basically, not to shoot him. So years later, he's driving down the road and he hears the same kind of voice in his head, what they call mind speak. And he said this thing told him that it was going to basically spend the rest of his life and hunt him down, type of a deal. And so he said he visibly saw it, and this thing followed him around. He moved multiple times across multiple states. So this thing kept following him around. It would jump on his house and all these different stuff. He would see it multiple times. Said he tried everything until he turned his life to Christ, right? Like he became a believer and he called on the name of Jesus. And this thing, he said it would leave him alone, and he had peace about it at that point in time. It's on my channel, really interesting encounter. But these things, are such a strange. There's so much strange stuff when it comes to these things, and who knows what's, what all's out there. But that's a pretty incredible encounter. But, for our audience, if you can, why don't you describe the area? Was it a really rural area? Was there many towns around you for people who maybe aren't familiar with that area?
It's a popular area for people to go hiking or taking their dogs and whatnot. We lived kind of at the base of the mountain. That's where this lake's at, and that's where all these houses are. But once you get away from that lake, then you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Um, you're nowhere near the city. You probably got about a 20-30 minute drive to get to the city itself.
Well, it sounds like a really beautiful area and kind of the perfect spot for one of these creatures to be, man. And and there is no good answer. There's no wrong answer with this. But with Dogman, I personally think they're just pure evil. But having that encounter, man, and having these type of experiences, what do you think these things are in your opinion?
Um, well, I kind of believe, they're kind of similar to Bigfoot. I think that they are some sort of species that, are really smart and staying out of most humans' eyesight to stay hidden. That way, we don't wipe them out like a lot of other different animals have been completely wiped out. I think they're just really smart. They want to stay hidden. I've heard things of, like Bigfoot jumping through portals. I kind of think that Dogman probably does the same thing, jumping through portals. Basically, off of other things I've heard on YouTube, as far as other stories and other encounters of, similar to what you were telling me earlier, where this Dogman was following this guy around no matter how many times he moved. I'm thinking there's no way it would find him that quickly. I think he has to jump through a portal to find him constantly as he moves.
Yeah, that's a good answer, man. And I think you're right. There's got to be more than just, than flesh and blood with these creatures. And I think there's a heavy supernatural aspect with these things. I think they're some kind of, Nephilim, fallen angel, kind of in the same realm with Bigfoot, in my opinion, because that's the only thing to me that makes sense. There's no other way they could do, some of the things that they do. So, I agree with you with that, man. But, this is kind of a question that I think I know the answer to. But if you had the opportunity to see one of these things again, would you want to?
If I wanted to, I'm definitely going to make sure I have a high powerful rifle. That way, if it wants to try to eat me, I can drop it if I had to.
Good answer, man. Good answer. I don't blame you for that. And it's definitely changed. It's going to change you forever. You're never going to look at the woods the same. You're never going to look at the world the same because, your eyes have been open. These things are there and that they're real. And, I think it's important to bring people on the show so they can share this information with people listening because it could save a life someday. And you never know with these things. But that brings up my next question, man. And what would you say to somebody that's listening to this podcast tonight that's maybe a skeptic or maybe they're not sure, they're on the fence, they don't know what to believe, but what would you say to them to convince them that this stuff is real and that they are out there?
For someone who isn't a believer or is skeptical of believing it, I wouldn't blame them. At first, I didn't even think that was something that it was even possible of it existing. Um, it really comes down to seeing it to believe it. I mean, that's what it boils down to, which I would not want someone to have to go through the same thing I did because that was absolutely terrifying. It boils down to you just got to see it to believe it. Or until somebody gets actual footage of these things that's not AI or something like that. That I've seen a lot of people doing AI videos. I'm like, look, it's Dogman. It's like, no, that's clearly AI, and then that's making people not believe it. Um, so until somebody actually gets a video, I wish I could have kept my video of what we saw. That would have been an epic video for everybody to see. Because there's no way you could say that was AI or that's faked. Some that's 8 foot tall. There's no person that's 8 foot tall.
Now that's a good answer, man. And seeing is believing, and what you saw. And when I had my encounter, I know what I saw, and you're convinced enough that it's changed your life, and so it's one of those things that is definitely life changing. And once they're there, it changes absolutely everything. But one more question that I would love to ask you is how do you think they're connected to Bigfoot? What do you think that connection is there? Because a lot of times you hear about these things in encounters like Martin Groves and stuff, but what's your opinion on that?
As far as connection goes between the two, I'm not sure. I think from what my understanding is, they're both really intelligent and they both want to stay hidden. I mean, Bigfoot's been a huge thing for I don't even know how long. I guess since the 80s, from what I've read. They're both very intelligent. They both want to stay hidden. They don't want people to see them. Now, why Dogman is, from what I've heard and read, don't know if it's true, of Dogman going and actually killing people and have hurt people. I think they're just more aggressive. I mean, think about it. I mean, Bigfoot's an ape. They don't really hurt people unless people really provoke it. Dogman, it's a wolf. I mean, they're a predator. They eat meat, so they're gonna go after whatever they can get their claws on. That would be my viewpoint for that.
Well, that's a good answer, and that makes a lot of sense. But I think these things thrive and live off of fear, and it's just their nature, and I think they're pure evil. You can look at Bigfoot however you want, but there's not really, in my opinion, with Dogman, these things are just evil. And you're fortunate to be here to share that. So I appreciate you taking the time, man. If you see something in the future, I'd love to hear about it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Man, I'm really excited to have you here. And I know we've been talking back and forth for a minute, and I'm excited to get this encounter out there. So, why don't you take us back to when you were 6 years old in the Piedmont Trail area and walk us through this encounter?
Okay. All right. So I was about 5 or 6 years old. I grew up in a brick home on a small farm in my hometown. Had a very small population. We live in a pretty much a town between two major cities, and where we're at, it was more rural, more of a county type, and we lived on a gravel road back in the woods. There are 5 houses on our road, and everybody was family. Each house was a different uh, branch of the family, and so me, my sister, who was about a year older than me, my dad, and my mom, we all lived in this house back in the woods. And we had the one house that was up on a ridge where everybody else's house was kind of, a little bit lower than ours and more tucked back. But we had this house up on the ridge, and um, in our backyard we had a barn and a pasture where we had, a couple horses. And I think we had some chickens at that time too, and a little garden, and stuff like that. But all in all, it was probably about a little 2 acre lot with a brick house on it, a brick house with a basement. And at this time of my life, we went to church, about every Sunday morning, night, and Wednesday. And when there were revivals, we were always there. I mean, it was, we were at church. Both grandparents, one set of grandparents lived on my road. We went to church with them, and my other grandparents. We all went to the same church, and we all, went together. So I was brought up a pretty religious, Baptist Christian household, and my faith was strong even at 5 or 6 years old, to the point where you remember when the preacher pastor was teaching about Revelations. I got scared, and I was like, well, I, I don't want to burn in hell. Uh, so I asked my mom to help me get saved, and I remember going outside my room and she kneeling down with me and walking me through, well, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to say. And if you believe in your heart that it's true, that's all you got to do. And so we did the thing, and I said the words, and I believed in my heart, and I was just excited. And then it seemed like after that, I don't know if it was spiritual warfare or just odd little things started happening, where I would just be real scared at night for no reason, you know, and I'd want to sleep with the light on, and my mom would, uh, my dad would get on to me for leaving the light on, because I'm running up the power bill or whatever. But so my mom came up with this plan. A nightlight wasn't big enough, by the way. I mean, it just, was keeping me. It wasn't safe enough for me. So my mom devised that these little aerosol cans that you spray, for the bathroom sprays or whatever. Well, this will keep the monsters and ghosts away, and the stuff like that. And that worked for a little while. I was like, okay, well, maybe this will work. And but I'd always sleep with my door open. And my sister always slept with her door shut. She was right across the hall from me. And, if I get scared, I'd run there, Whitney, 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 come on, open up, I'm scared or something, and she said she remembered me always going over there. But anyway, on this particular occasion, let's go to the night of the actual event. Um, well, before I go to the night of the event, if I was sleeping by myself, it was because my mom fell asleep with me in the bed and she got up and left in the middle of the night, or somehow I just passed out from total exhaustion. On this particular night, I was sleeping in my bed, and my bed was up against a wall in my bedroom. So this right here would be where the side of my bed is. This right here would be kind of towards the foot of my bed. And at the foot of my bed on that wall, we're actually underneath. We're in the basement right now of the exact house. So actually, right up there, above the basement is my old bedroom, and the window is right there at the foot of my bed. So I'm sleeping in the bed, and for some reason, I just kind of quietly woke up. It wasn't an abrupt wake up. It wasn't like I was scared. I just woke up out of my bed this direction, and I'm looking at the foot of my bed, and my my mini blinds are, best I can remember, they were up probably halfway, and they were in the open position. So I got about this much viewing without, obstruction at the bottom, and then the mini blinds were open, and moonlight or whatever's kind of casting through it a little bit. And I just remember everything being eerily quiet when I woke up. Most of the time you could hear like crickets or dad snoring or something. And I just remember being real quiet, and I felt like something was compelling me to go over to the window and look out. And so I kind of slid off the foot of my bed. I didn't hop out of the side of my twin bed. I slid to the end and put my feet on the ground, towards the window right there. And I got up out of bed. I had a dresser in front of my bed, and to the right of the dresser was a window. I walked over to the window, and I imagine the base of the window is probably about right here. My chin's just barely over it, at 5 or 6 years old. And I remember peering out the window, and about, not really good with distances, but from where my window was to where our barn was, actually behind the barn, there used to be a little metal red shed to the back right of the barn, and that's where we kept our lawnmower and stuff. And I remember seeing look like two little red glowing eyes, and to me they looked like glowing coals, like in a fire. They didn't look like how a horse's eyes will actually catch light too and cast a reflection, or like a cat or whatever. But to me, it looked more like it was producing light rather than reflecting light. So picture me looking out the window, seeing two little red hot coal eyes looking back at me. And after my eyes adjusted, I could see sort of a silhouette of what definitely had pointed ears. It looked black from my perspective because all I could see was a silhouette at this point. So looked like pointed ears, broad, and it had sort of, what you would think of a classic werewolf or wolfman type features. But I couldn't tell that it was a wolf at this point. I just knew that it had glowing red eyes, pointed ears, and it was far enough away from me to where I wasn't afraid of it. I could see it. I didn't know it could see me. So I watched it for a little while, and it did shuffle. It moved slightly. I could see it moving, but its eyes were always focused in my direction. But I didn't know it was, honing in on me. I didn't know it could see me. So I backed away and sat at the footboard of my bed, and I'm sitting on the bed, and then I see, I didn't see anything at that point, but I'm just kind of getting my thoughts together, and I kind of wanted to look at it again because I was curious, and so I'm curious about it. So I go to look again, and I don't see it this time. So I'm like, okay, so I back away from the window, and the window's right here, and I'm just sort of kind of trying to peek around a little bit. And I don't know if it was the third or fourth time, but one of the next few times I looked, it was closer. We used to have a big pine tree that my dad eventually built a treehouse in front of the barn. And it was, I have a hard time remembering if it was on the tree, hanging on the tree, or if it was just kind of perched at the base of the tree. But I remember thinking at this point when I saw it, it was closer, and I could tell it was a wolfman type thing at that time. Had a long snout. I couldn't see teeth at this point. Its eyes were like red-orange glowing coals. I could tell it had fur. So it had pointed ears. It had fur kind of coming off. And you could see the fur kind of coming off its elbows, like where I could tell it was muscular. It was, I mean, like a Wolverine or like a Spider-Man kind of build. I mean, it was lean, it was muscular, and it was perched either on the side of the tree or at the base of the tree in sort of a crouch type position. I don't remember if it was hanging or if it was like more on the side, and at that point, it seemed interested in me. I could tell like it knew I was there at that point, but I didn't get the sense that it was menacing or evil per se. But I definitely started getting nervous, the fact that it was taking interest in me. So I remember, and I had to talk to my sister about this. She filled me in on some of the details, because when you're 5 or 6 years old and you tell your family members, they'll help you out remembering some of these things. But she told me that I told her that I pulled the actual string of the blinds down to drop it, which is totally possible for a 5 or 6 year old. I wouldn't have been able to turn the blind shut, but I could reach the string. So they come down. Now the blinds are down. He knows I shut the blinds, and the mini blinds are open to where I could still see out if I wanted to. Well, I was kind of nervous at this point. Heart was pumping. You just feel like something's about to happen. And I'm over there at the edge of my bed, and I haven't got up to tell anybody about this. And I just start hearing a little tapping like that. And then I didn't think too much of it. I'm like, I'm not looking. And then and I'm thinking, well, maybe it's okay, And next thing I know, I'm opening up the blinds further to see. And I feel like its eyes just opened, glowing red. It looked like swirls, like its eyes were like swirling, like I don't know, like spin art, like it's just sucking you in. You know what I mean? I'm face to face with it. It's got the head of a wolf, or like a brown or dark gray, or some kind of shade like that. Hair, tall ears. You could see its breath on the window pane, or on the window, and it was just menacing looking. And I'll never forget, it held up its hand just like this, its right hand. Its finger, I mean, it was like an NBA player. His fingers was like that long. Held up its hand, huge knuckles, hair coming off its, the edge of its knuckles. And it said, "Come here," like that. And it was like all the hairs on my body stood up. And I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. And I couldn't determine, like, thinking about it in retrospect, like, it felt like I could feel it in my chest. Like, it felt like it hit me with I can't remember if I saw its tongue move saying "come here," but I knew that that's what it was getting across, and I heard it clear as day. And I remember crumbling to the floor. When I finally was out of its trance, I crumbled to the floor at my window, and I turned to run to my door to open it, and it's like my legs weren't working, like nothing was working the way I wanted it to. I get to the doorknob, I'm like, fumbling with it, trying to open it. I get it open, I run down the hall, bank a right, back to my parents' room, which is my now bedroom, and I'm wake my mom up. She's like, "What's the matter?" I'm screaming, I'm crying, I'm telling her what just happened. I'm like, there's a wolf, man. And it's at my window, told me to come here. And my dad's like, "What the hell's going on, boy?" Like, trying to get some sleep. And I'm just like, "No, there's a wolf, man. I'm telling you." He's like, "I'm tired of hearing this. You need to start sleeping by yourself." and he's mad, and he's throwing his boots on, and he's like, I'm gonna go out there right now. Grabs his gun, I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna show that wolf man. He don't, he obviously doesn't believe me, but he is gonna put an end to this, this scaredy tactics. They knew I was a scaredy cat, but I hung on to his leg, and I'm like, no, Dad, no, please, don't go out there. He'll eat you. He'll eat you. I'm freaking out. Like, this thing's going to eat my dad because he doesn't believe me because I've lied, about all these other not encounters, but, being afraid of stuff in my closet or whatever. And something actually happens and nobody believes me. But it was one of those things where, that night passed, and ever since then, I can't look out that window at night. Growing up, I mean, I was 19 years old, sleeping with the light on in that room. I mean, it was rare for me to sleep in that room with the light off after that happened. And now that my daughter has a room, I still won't look out that window at night. I don't like looking out any windows in my house at night, or walking in the backyard at night, or in the woods near my house at night. It's definitely had a major effect on me for my entire life. And, and the fact that it's one of those things that I haven't told many people because, one, it makes me look like a crazy person. Two, I'm a devout Christian, and talking about some of these things might make people think I might be crazy. So, and I've tried to write it off on all these things growing up. I'm like, well, people are like, well, you were sleeping. No, I wasn't sleeping. Well, you were sleepwalking. I never sleptwalk, and then I asked my sister, I'm like, well, what if I took too much Robitussin or something, when I had a cold? No, that wouldn't do it. It's like, I can't justify I can't rationalize with anything.
That's a really common reaction because you're seeing stuff that's, we're told our whole lives is not supposed to be there. And especially as a young kid, that's, the boogeyman's not real, and then when you look out your window and you see something like that and you share it with people, they don't know what to do with it. And, I know you touched on it a little bit, and man, that's one of the scariest encounters I personally have ever heard. And I'm really glad you were brave enough to come forward with that. And hopefully that'll help somebody else that's going through this. But I know you touched on it, but in what ways exactly did that affect your life, man?
For me personally, and my sister, I talked to her about it yesterday because I was trying to figure out, I had an eating disorder when I was a kid where, shortly after this too, I mean, my parents had a rough marriage, and it was always rocky ever since I can remember. It seems like a lot of people that deal with encounters and paranormal stuff have a broken home or something growing up too, which is also kind of unusual, a pattern I've been noticing on my end. But I had a eating disorder, and I was hearing voices in my head after this happened for about a year or two. Things that would say, it was almost like, if you do this, it was almost like something in my head was trying to make a bet with me. And it was like, hey, I bet you can't make that basketball and that goal. If you don't make it, you're going to burn in hell. And I would always say, like, no bet, like I would never bet, it was always like, no, I'm not going to bet you. And that was stuck in my head for like a year or two. And then when I kept denying these little bets that kept popping in my head, it found a different way to attack me by, I wasn't able to, like, I choked on food around the same time, and almost passed out and lost consciousness. And I had a hard time chewing solid foods and like eating it. So I lost a lot of weight and got really skinny in school, in elementary school, and to the fact of where I would chew like steak just to taste it and then just spit it out because I was afraid I was going to choke on it. And I remember going to a church about a year or two later, and I was skinny as a rail, and they had a whole buffet out, and I'm drooling, and I'm looking at these Krispy Kreme donuts, and this man said, "Hey son, why don't you get a donut?" And I was like, "I can't." And my mom had to explain to him that I had like an eating disorder, and it was called, And he said, "Why don't you just give it a try?" And I was like, "Nah, I can't." He's like, "Go ahead, give it a try." He made me a plate. I ate every donut on my plate. I ate like all these pizzas. I didn't choke on anything. It was like amazing. And it was once I got back into church, after my family had kind of been broken up a little bit. And it was just, I mean, that right there to me, it meant something. And it made me feel like that whatever I saw, I personally feel, and I could be wrong, but it felt evil. It felt demonic. It felt manipulative. It got inside my head. Obviously, it's still inside my head to some degree. But
There's a couple of key things there in your story that really stand out to me, and there's a lot that I want to get into. But we hear about mind speak with these creatures, and what you described to me with what it said to you at the window, and then later on those voices that you heard. It reminds me of the last guest I had on who talked about Dogman, and that's something that these things do. I don't understand everything about it, but the key thing to me is like, obviously, there's power in the name of Jesus, and there's power in the blood. And I think when you are in that atmosphere, it breaks the hold of whatever these things are. And I agree with you. I think they're evil. A couple of questions is you said in the very beginning of the story, when you first dedicated your life to Christ, that's when these things started happening. And then secondly, when you heard that voice, was it more of an audible voice, or was it more, kind of in your head, like we described later on?
I feel like looking back, it was more in my head or in my chest, kind of like the way I felt. Like it's almost like if you had ears inside your chest, you could just feel it in your core. It was like if you're acting up and your dad says something and it rumbles you, and you're about to get the big one, or you about to get in trouble. It felt like that, but like just I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I heard it or if I felt it or both. I mean, I feel like I feel like he was leading me to the window up to that point. I feel like he was manipulating my usual thought pattern, where normally I would just run away and go to mom's room if I thought something weird was happening. But he made it feel, best way to describe it, the movie It, when you're thinking about Pennywise, right? And how he's trying to convince Georgie, like, it's a good idea. Like, I've got popcorn, I've got it was a very similar kind of vibe where like it didn't feel I didn't feel threatened at first, but once I got too close, it's it's too late. I still have my arm though, so.
I've never heard of an encounter with somebody who was that close to one of these creatures like that, and so, in my opinion, you're very fortunate to have made it through that night, and to through that whole time in your life, actually, and to be here to share that with our audience, because I mean those things. I mean, why else would it want you to come outside, right? Like I think these things are they're pure evil in my opinion. And what do you think it wanted? I mean, in your opinion, what do you think it wanted?
I don't know what it wanted. I feel like I was an easy target because I wanted salvation. I wanted salvation from burning in hell, but I don't think my heart was in the right place. I don't think I wanted to get saved when I was 5 or 6 because because I was aware of everything Jesus had actually done for me. I think it was, I got saved again later on in life when I could mentally understand everything that Jesus did for us. But when I was a kid, it was more based out of fear. It was, I got saved because I didn't want to burn in hell. It wasn't because, it wasn't for the reason it should have been. And I think he honed in on that fear. And I feel like he was doing anything and everything he possibly could to lead me astray. And some of these little bets he put in my head even though he wasn't physically there. I feel like he somehow locked into my consciousness and got inside my head. And some of the things he was wanting me to do weren't necessarily great things. Wasn't something, a Christian kid, should do. Missing a basketball shot was one thing, but, pushing a cousin off a porch or something, that's another, and I wouldn't do it. I was too good of a kid.
It makes you wonder how many people that do really bad things in this world are being manipulated by these creatures, by these type of entities. And to me, I think they're demons. That's what they got to be. But it's good that you grew up in a home like you did, and that makes a lot of sense. A lot of times people talk about how these things thrive off of fear. And I believe that wholeheartedly, and I don't think, their whole objective is just to get you scared to do things, you shouldn't do maybe. But I would love to know your opinion on this. I've never asked, I guess, this question, I don't think, on an interview, but coming that close to one of these creatures and seeing that and having that experience, do you think that these things are really closely tied to some of the missing 411 cases and just different people that go missing around the U.S.?
That's a good question. I think possibly, but I'm not sure because I couldn't tell. The more I've thought about it, I don't know if these things are operating, similar to how UFOs are, where they seem to defy the laws of physics and they can jump in and out and you can't touch them and they're there. They can interact with us, but we can't fit because nobody's ever, as far as I know, caught one or trapped one or anything like that. So it seems like they're able to slip in and out of dimensions somehow or another to where they can show up when they want to and they can disappear when they want to. But I would imagine if they can operate on multiple different planes that they could become physical if they wanted to, or they could drag people back into their dimension. I mean, who knows what they do.
There's a lot of things in God's universe I think we don't understand. And, I think the truest statement I've ever heard is when they're flesh and blood, they're flesh and blood. When they're not, they're not. And I think these things can go back and forth. And, you start hearing some of these encounters and go down these rabbit holes. You hear about portals and everything else. And, I used to think all that stuff was crazy, but I don't anymore, and there's just things we don't understand and can't explain. But with all that being said, man, and I would love to hear your opinion. What do you think these things are?
I think they are, I don't know if they're demons or if they are something else. I mean, I think it all falls into, everything that I believe in. I mean, you don't really hear about, werewolves or Dogman in the Bible or whatever, but I mean, I don't know how it all ties into my faith per se, and that's why it's, kind of weird for me to even talk about it, but I know what I saw. I've told both my pastors through the years about this, and, they take it with a grain of salt, I'm sure, but when I'm on a worship team or whatever, like, just so you know, if this ever pops up, you heard it from me first. So, and I can laugh about it a little bit now because I'm strong enough in my faith to where if I did see something again, it's not going to get me. And if it does get me, then it's on YouTube for everybody to know this is what got me. So I think my chances are probably better now of surviving. But I don't know what it is. I mean, it seems like it could be. I'd like to say it's a demonic presence, spirit, something that can maybe change shape to what it knows you'd be most afraid of, possibly. I don't know if it's always a Dogman. It might look like an alien to somebody else. It might look like a ghost to somebody else, I don't know. That's
a great answer, man. And I think you're right on a lot of those points. And, I look at things through a biblical lens too, man. It's my faith is super important to me. And I think these things are, shapeshifters, and it sounds really weird coming out of your mouth as a believer to say that, right? That's such an odd thing to say, but if you look at things biblically, to go down that road, it's like, an angel, the Bible says we see angels unaware. Like you can see an angel unaware. So that lets me know that they can change forms. And, I don't know exactly where it's at, but there's another scripture that says, that God's gifts are without repentance. And so if an angel can do that, then why can a fallen angel not do that, right? So maybe these things are fallen angels, demons, and they can be whatever you're most afraid of and manipulate and do the things that they do. But, those are the things that keep you up at night, man. And I'm like you, the more I hear this stuff, the less I want to look out windows. And definitely I don't go out into the deep woods anymore for sure. I know that you mentioned that there was a couple of other things that happened that you thought might be related to that. Are you open to talking about that?
Yeah, that's fine. So as far as related to that, I was before this event happened, I was, I guess, 5 years old, and I remember watching a movie, The Lady in White, with my mom, which is a 80s ghost flick. It's really good if you haven't checked it out. It's called The Lady in White. And this kid gets locked in a closet at a school. Some bullies get lock him in a closet, stays there overnight, and it's a whole thing. Anyway, check it out. But so we're watching this movie. It's freaking me out. I'm scared. We're downstairs where I'm at right now, except we got to finish den over there where we used to watch movies and stuff. And my dad used to park in the back driveway over there. And when he would get home, we would hear the screen door open, shut. He would go upstairs and, he'd get him a snack or something to drink or something. But when he came in, we said, Daddy's home, Daddy's home. We heard the screen door shut. We heard the footsteps go upstairs. And my mom's like, Dennis, he didn't say anything. She's like, Dennis. And he didn't say anything. So she left the room where we were watching the movie, went upstairs, and she came back down. She's like, did your dad come in here? And we was like, no. And so we followed Mom upstairs, and we looked out my sister's bedroom window, which is across the hall from mine, out the back driveway, and his truck wasn't there. And we were like, oh, okay, well, that's weird. And, this is before cell phones. I think my dad had a beeper or something. So he eventually came home, and, he was like, nah, I wasn't there. So that's when I started getting scared anyway. That's what led up to the whole Wolfman or Werewolf or Dogman incident. And after that, I feel like there were so many things that happened up till the point of me being 19 years old and moving out of that house. I had instances in the house when I got through with my eating disorder, things kind of tapered down for a little bit and, weren't so scary or anything. But eventually I got a dog that would stay in my room with me. And I felt pretty safe, even though I was still sleeping with the light on in high school, because I was still scared. But I'd have buddies sleep over sometime. And I remember one night I was up really, really late, 2 or 3 in the morning or something. And we were playing some kind of Grand Theft Auto game or something. My buddy fell asleep on the bed, and I'm still playing. And I go to open my door to go use the bathroom. And I reached the door was open about this far, and it was black in the bathroom. The lights were off. I reached in to turn on the light, and when I reached in to turn on the light, I heard Will, just clear as day, said my name. Hair stood up. I mean, imagine reaching in a door and hearing somebody call your name. And I thought somebody was in the bathroom. So I said, yeah. And they didn't say anything. So I'm like, I don't have to pee anymore. So I turned around, went in the bed, and cuddled up to my 16, 17-year-old buddy and just waited for the morning to come, And nobody was awake at that time. Nobody was in the bathroom. And I had another similar situation happen at his house when I spent the night, when I was by myself. On my laptop, I hear my name, Will. And I said, yeah, thinking it was his dad. Walked back to the office where I thought his dad was. His dad wasn't there. So things were calling out to him. And then probably 18 or 19 years old, I'm laying in my bed. I'm laying like this. I'm I'm looking towards my closet, and I had a closet that had a hinge door that would kind of open like this to go in and out of the closet. And I'm laying in bed, and my closet door just goes, it opens like this, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, I'm a 19-year-old man. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, that's weird. And then my dog, who was asleep, got up, went to the edge of the bed, got real tense, and just started growling towards the closet. So I'm like thinking, what is going on? Then things started being tossed out of my closet. Like, not falling, but like looked like something was underhand tossing certain things out of my closet. So I just pulled the blanket over my head and just closed my eyes. I had the lights on. The dog was growling. I didn't know what to do. I just laid there until it stopped. And that was the last scary thing that ever happened. Well, to me, in this house. I bought the house when I was 29 years old, I think. I'm 36 now. I've lived here this whole time. Not a single scary thing has happened, which is great. My kids haven't had anything scary happen. Nobody's been freaked out.
You know, there's so many things people never think about, and I personally believe that the things you do, you open doors, you close doors, like into realms that we can't see, and obviously something happened because, you know, these Dogman creatures, whatever they are definitely from another. It sounds so weird to say, but from another realm. I mean, there's something is open up doors where these things come through. I think, you know, you hear a lot about in Tennessee and in different areas like the LBL, Land Between the Lakes. They talk about portals and different stuff. And I believe these things are popping in and out, stuff like that. And thank goodness that things worked out for your family and they turned some, things around, and very thankful for that. And I'm glad that you're here to share that encounter. What an incredible encounter. And I believe that it was God kept you safe, man. And I'm grateful for that. And I think about that all the time with my family and all these experiences. But, what would you say to somebody listening to this podcast that is maybe, doesn't believe in Dogman, doesn't believe in these creatures? What would you say to them?
I would say that I hope you never come face to face with him. I hope you never see him. I hope you're never walking your dog and see those two eyes. And if you do see those two eyes, don't entertain it. Don't focus on it. Have faith. I feel like if I ever felt scared, I would just command them in the name of Jesus Christ to stay away. And I honestly feel like that would keep them away.
That is the best answer you can give, man. Will, that's a great answer. I firmly believe that's what keeps these creatures away, and there's protection in that name. I had this is kind of odd. I think you're the third or fourth guest from North Carolina that's been on my show that's had a Dogman encounter or something like that. I had a gentleman on the show that had an encounter like that, and he was out camping with his dad and his kid, and they were out in the middle of the woods. And long story short, they saw these green eyes, which was really odd to him, he said. But these green eyes, and they came towards the tent, and then everything got really, really strange, and he felt just fear. They had guns with them, but they knew they wouldn't do any good, right? So he said that this thing came up close to the tent, cocked its head, turned its head back, and then came back up, stood back up. And he said the next thing there's a set of another eyes next to it, but shorter. So they don't know what to do. He said they're sitting there, and all of a sudden they disappear. And his dad gets a hold of him. I'm sure I'm messing some of this up, but they look up, and there's two orbs floating above this tent. And, things just feel evil, feel wrong. And his dad rebukes them in the name of Jesus, and they leave. And so time and time again, man, I hear these encounters and people talking about that, and they have to go. And so that, that's why I think they're demonic and they're evil. And, so that long way of saying that's some great advice, man. And that's definitely why I say what I do at the end of the show. And faith is super important to me. But, I really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing that experience. These things are not easy to talk about, but hopefully that got some of that off your chest, man, and helps you feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's part of the reason I did it. I kind of want to let this go, and bottling it up and only telling a few people, and this might help somebody else out that has seen, somebody may have seen the same thing, and they're like, no way, I saw this. I hope nobody saw it, but if they did and they're in the same area as me, the Piedmont Triad in North Carolina, this was probably around 1992, if I had to take a guess, or 3 or something like that. I mean, early 90s.
It's such a strange world, and these encounters with these Dogman creatures, every time I hear these, it makes me realize how fortunate people are to be able to walk away from an encounter like this, because these things are life-changing, and they're real and they're out there. And so if you're listening to this podcast tonight, just make sure you're keeping a head on a swivel and you're careful when you're out there. And I appreciate everybody being here and being part of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you guys, but as always, just thanks for being here. If you've got a mystery and encounter you would like to send me, you can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. Stay prayed up, guys. We'll see you in the next episode.